resilience is an ongoing journey,
Mm.
and you're only as resilient as your last major challenge.
The right conversation can change everything. This is Mirror Talk, Soulful Conversations.
Welcome back to Mirror Talk, Soulful Conversations, where we explore the inner journeys that shape meaningful lives and conscious leadership. Today, I'm joined by a transformational leadership strategist and resilience mentor whose work speaks directly to the times we are living in. With over 3 decades of experience navigating boardrooms, crises, and profound personal turning points, it brings a rare blend of lived wisdom and practical clarity. He is the founder of Sanjiv Speaks, the creator of the HEALS model and the 3 R's of resilience, and is also the host of the podcast, Just Another Lens. His work has reached global organizations like Microsoft, Citi, the NHS, and Warwick Business School, and has been honored to share on TEDx stages and leadership platforms around the world. At the heart of his work is a simple but powerful truth. Leadership begins within, and resilience is something we can all learn. Sanjiv, it's a joy to welcome you to Mirror Talk. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Toby. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because at the heart of what you do, having authentic conversations that can help people navigate their journeys is at the heart of what I do. And I think that's what you do too. So I'm really looking forward to sharing whatever I can authentically, vulnerably, and hopefully something within that your listeners will connect with, make some small difference. So yeah, look, let's make this happen.
Yes, there is. Yes, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I want to speak with you on this podcast, because of, the way you share your story, even on your podcast, with what you do on TEDx, being open to share the experiences that you've had. And I'm looking forward to learn all of that. Yeah, before we go into, learn about resilience through your lenses, through your lens, basically, I would like us to play a quick game of wild cards, 3 stacks of cards. First level is the icebreakers level. Second level is confessions. Third level is getting deep. It's just a way to get to know you in a fun way through questions that I do not know. Shuffling the first stack of cards right now, and I've picked the card randomly. Oh, okay. And I've picked the card to ask you. The first question is, what is an insecurity of yours?
What's an insecurity of mine? I would be honest. I think imposter syndrome is what a lot of people have.
Yeah.
Maybe people who are in visible profiles don't openly say that. So I guess one of my things I would say is, I like everybody else have imposter syndromes, and surrounding myself with good people, honest people, is one of the life hacks that I recommend to my clients, is what I do to try and, dial in if I'm not so sure. So that, I guess, does that answer your question? Is that
Yes, it does. Yeah. And it's very relatable too, just feeling that, do I belong here actually? Do I deserve to be here? Sometimes gives you that sense of insecurity. So yeah, thanks so much for that honest answer. Are you ready for the next one?
Sure, go for it.
So this is level 2, confessions. I picked the card already, and the question is, what was the happiest point in your life? Or what is, because you're still alive, the happiest point in your life?
Wow, so many I could choose from, I guess. I think at heart, I'm somebody who values relationships on a human level. And so moments in my journey where, you've had children, anybody who's got kids, when they're born, it's something that transforms your life. For that realization, that moment, I think when both my kids were born, I can't choose between the two of them because they're both amazing moments. But I would say that if I look back at some of the moments, that would probably be, for me, one of the happiest moments, memorable moments, because I can realize it now. I remember exactly how I was there in the theater, by the way, for both of them. And I was there looking at their first, that first smile, that first look, and everything kind of going, wow, my world changes from here. And then they become the center of your universe.
And that's true. Everything you do is about them. It's for them. Yeah. That's so beautiful. Wow. That's a beautiful answer. Ready for the last wildcard question?
Go for it.
Yes. Thank you. The question is, are you holding onto something you need to let go of?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I guess I often ask myself that. Hopefully, I'll share some of the insights of the trauma I've been through. Having spent, over 2 decades helping people navigate resilience, sharing my stories. One of the things that has become a truth, I guess, a universal truth for me, because at no point I believe that you become resilient. I think resilience is an ongoing journey, and you're only as resilient as your last major challenge. And so one of the challenges, more recent challenges, and I'm happy to share now, or I can share later on, was
Yeah,
a
that's
tragic
good.
loss of a loved one. So would you like me to share that and why that may be
Yeah,
something I'm
please, you
hanging?
can. Yes,
So
you
if I
can.
take the story back a bit, so I'm one of those traditional Indian families brought up with my parents, and it felt so natural to have my parents with me for the later years. We have this philosophy, which I think a philosophy that many people resonate with. In your early years, your parents are there to basically protect you, understand you, have that patience with you when you're frail, and they nurture you to grow into an adult, right? And they support you through that journey. But in the other end of that belt in life, we all go through a physical deterioration, right?
Yeah.
And culturally, it's a natural cycle of life where you look after your parents when they're at that stage of their life with the same love and care and respect that they had with you when you were a child. But some people, they think, well, how does that work? Because parents have their natures and we want our freedom, our independence, but it's a very much values based thing for me. And so it was a joy to have my parents with me. I have an elder brother who emigrated to New Zealand and now in Australia. I love him to bits, but I had the joy of having my parents with me for all of my life, I guess. 2020 came along, which we've all experienced, that dramatic time in the world when this invisible alien disease came to all of us in our homes and the world stopped. I was one of the people who I thought, well, I know in my circle was probably one of the most prepared because that's part of my conditioning to always look forward and scan the horizon to see what's coming, what's the probability, what's the risk. And so from a practical point of view, I was prepared for lockdown before anything officially happened in the UK, officially. But along that journey, just fate had it that this virus came into my home really early on before anybody knew how to tackle it, what it meant, what it does. And so I was in a situation where I was battling at home, hoping against hope that this isn't COVID. Because all you see on the news, if you replay the tape, you'll see body bags, you see
Yeah.
places closed down, you see this horror. And because I planned, speaking to my brother as a doctor, months in advance, we knew this pandemic was probably coming. I was more tuned in probably than most people. But, in life you can plan, but then life is what happens, not what you plan. So it doesn't mean you don't plan, but what's going to happen is going to happen eventually. But so what happened at early stages is I got really ill. We had a family of 6 in my home, myself, my wife, my 2 grown-up kids, and my elderly parents. And I had to experience, as the person who's the protector in the family, feeling the pain, but trying to keep a lid on it visibly. I kind of see myself as a bit of a swan. So calm and graceful on the surface, but kicking like crazy underneath to fight whatever challenges life is throwing at me. And so that was my approach. And then seeing this unfold day to day over the first week, for example, I'm getting worse, but I'm fighting this. Seeing the fever catch fire in the home, to the loved ones that you have, that you're the protector for, and you've always seen yourself as that. And then the challenge of what on earth is this going to do? Because there is no cure. At the time, there was no cure. And they were talking about limited hospital beds, there was no support. If you ended up in hospital, the probability of coming out was very small at the time. But kind of being at peace with that, but still fighting. My worry was everybody else. And I think people may relate to that who see themselves in that guardian role. That my worry was, how is this going to play out as I see it with my family? And I was trying to guide them without worrying them, without freaking them out, because as much as I knew, I couldn't share too much. We were trying because WhatsApp was full of, social media full of, it's this, it's that, this is how you collect it, this is how you deal with it. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I had my brother, who I believe is, one of the best doctors on the planet. All his life, he's been able to pick up things that other people don't. And I had him in the first week, at least, kind of touching base every day, trying to make sense of this, listening to me, but suggesting interventions from antibiotics to something more aggressive, steroidal, etc. But nothing was working.
Sometimes you do not need another podcast episode. You need the right reflection for where you are in this moment. Introducing Ask Mirror Talk. a new space where you can ask what is on your heart and receive thoughtful reflections drawn from real conversations from the Mirror Talk Soulful Conversations podcast. Whether you are navigating growth, searching for clarity, feeling stuck, or simply reflecting on life, Ask Mirror Talk connects your question to meaningful podcast moments that may speak directly to you. No generic advice, no data collected, completely anonymous. Just honest questions and real conversations that help you see more clearly. Ask what is on your heart. Try it now. mirrortalkpodcast.com/ask-mirror-talk.
And it got to a stage where I was literally crawling. And my daughter, 3 or 4 days before this, I remember messaging me, said, Dad, you need to call the ambulance. Now, you have a responsibility, a care as a protector, and you sit there and go. But my focus was much as about me fighting moment to moment. I was determined to hang in there as long as I could to see what happens and how I can help and support my parents, my family. My dad, who was 80 then, he'd been ill with Parkinson's for 3 or 4 years, so I'd seen him go like this. But we'd got him stable and happy. We'd had a happy home. And seeing him deteriorate suddenly. So what I would do is limit my time anywhere, but every evening I'd crawl out of bed whilst his wave would allow and get myself to where everybody is, sit in a corner, just observe. So that in their head, I'm down there to feed or fuel. I was more down there to see how things are going. And then in a limited space, I'll curl up and go back again. Excuse me. It got to a stage where I remember that morning, I got a message from my family, my son. Grandfather is on the floor below me. He's in a bad way. And I remember crawling down and having a look, and he was. And I had to take the responsibility of that call to say, call the ambulance. I remember, although I was physically a mess myself and struggling, seeing 6 people turn up with hazmats, clothing, these white suits that you see on a nuclear disaster type of thing in films. It happened at my home, and there's 3 things come outside my home and taking him away. And then I'm having my own battle. But 12 hours later, they found me unconscious. So they called the ambulance, and I remember them taking me away. And I remember them taking me away. It was a sunny day. I'm in the back of an ambulance, but I was at peace. Why was I at peace? Because in my head, in my heart, I'd always done everything on the moments. A lesson for life is if you see that you can make a difference, whether it's with your loved ones or people around you, if you can make a difference, you don't know what tomorrow brings, go do it. Figure out what the worst is going to happen. And as long as you can get through that, go and make a difference, go and help. So I'd been that person, whether it's my parents, they didn't have to think about, I'd like this. The moment my nature has become that nature, somebody has to just suggest something, or I get an insight in something, I go and do it, make it happen. Whether that's something as simple as let's go and grab something to eat, I fancy eating this, to something even more meaningful. Now, so that I was at peace, and I wasn't sure where this was going to happen. I was in a different hospital, taken to a different hospital. I remember arriving there, and I'm how to try and describe to people how bad I was. When I say I was crawling, I don't mean just crawling. I mean, I'm in a flat bed, and I have to even go to the washroom, to roll out of bed, because the effort of standing is like you're standing on Mount Everest and gasping for breath without an oxygen tank.
Wow.
Then crawling to the door, getting that door open, going right next door where there's a bathroom door, and then having to lever yourself up. And that is exhausting to the next level, and you're gasping for breath. I remember having to shoot back to my bed and crawl back and collapse to try and regain my composure of some level. That's how bad I was. That's how far I'd kept pushing it to be there. So by the time I got to hospital, they'd had an oxygen mask on me. And I remember a few things from that journey. One of which was at some stage, a consultant came up to me and asked me, what's your symptoms? And when somebody is that far gone, you can share what you can share, but I remember sharing some. I remember another moment in that they send me for whatever scans and tests. And he came back and he said, listen, we don't need to wait for the blood tests. I've looked at your CT scan and it's all over your lungs, everywhere. And I've seen enough of these. Now, taking it back brings me back to a bit of a trauma. But I think that's what you want to hear. You want to hear it authentically. I can feel how it was. So bear with me. He said at a time when intubation, putting a tube down you, and there are limited beds and limited one of these machines in the hospitals. I remember reading about this and hearing about this, that there are limited beds and you have to qualify for it. And some people won't qualify, which they can't treat them. But also people were not guaranteed to make it out of that. So he basically said, the positive news for you is that you qualify for intubation. That's a scary moment. In all of these moments, I don't think I was scared until, wow, okay. And I remember I'm deeply spiritual. So, I believe universally, whichever path you take, we're all connected in the same way. So having a spiritual sense to your life gives you strength, gives you wisdom, gives you that resilience to get through difficult moments. And I remember a really profound monk, Hindu monk, Brahma Vihari Swami, who's the kind of creator of the Abu Dhabi Hindu Mandir, which is something that people should look up. It's mind-blowing how it became a spiritual oasis of harmony across cultures, across faiths. Now, he was touching base with me in the lead up to this because he'd heard how ill I was. But he reminded me when I went out of hospital eventually, when I managed to fight my way out, he got in touch and he said, I was really worried about you. And at that last moment, I said, why? Because of the message you sent me. I'm
What's the
going, what
message?
message I sent you? And that's it. And then I had to look back at my phone and I said, it's from the hospital at that time. It was difficult. Excuse me.
Sorry.
I told him my kids are good kids. Look after them. Kind of that tunes back into what we said about what was my difficult moments, what was my love, what do I think that great moment of my life. Interestingly, it was the kids I remembered. So anyway, in that hospital journey, there was a stage where I managed to fight and turn it around. But I got a message then that my father wasn't going to make it. Somebody who had served and loved all these years. But in that moment, my head was very clear. Interestingly, I might have brain fog for lots of things, but I knew what needed to be done. For me, my focus is then on my family, the rest of them, and my mother, and what they're going through. How are they fighting this? What's going to happen? And I remember lining up. This was thankfully when I was fighting and I wasn't in that level of severity. They were still treating me, but I was determined to fight. I was still struggling to breathe. I couldn't stand by myself. I couldn't walk to the washroom, 10 yards, all of that. But at least I was going, okay, focus. So I had this call. I lined up a short call because they didn't let anybody visit you, but they let you have your phone. And I remember consciously going, okay, it's here. Send a message. And even writing a message was difficult. People have been through this go, well, you couldn't coherently write something because you are that far gone. But I just said, listen, we need to talk. And I did a video call, and that was my mother and my family, the rest of my family. I said, listen, Dad's run his line. He's gone his course. We need to accept it and celebrate his life. We got a choice here. We can either carry the weight of why and the pain. Otherwise, we reset and we go, right, from here, think about all the good things. Think about the positive memories that we've thankfully had all this time. And we have to live with that as our strength going forward. We have to celebrate the teachings and the lessons and the support he's given us. And I remember saying that to my family. I said, I'm going to fight. You don't worry. I'm going to fight. And I was determined. I didn't know how I'd fight, but I was going to fight. And that journey, when I came out, I was very clear that at the time, COVID was stigma still. People were scared of it like crazy. Rightfully, people were taking liberties and not protecting themselves. And I was going, I've learned so much by being able to turn this around and what it means and how to fight it and what I've learned, that when I was asked to talk about it, I said, sure. Now, was it easy? No. I remember being on a podcast, a webinar for Warwick Business School a month, 6 weeks later, which I'd agreed to do when they'd messaged me a week or two after hospital, saying, we'd love to hear this. I said, sure. And in my head, I'd be better in 3-4 weeks. Of course I would be. But that 3-4 weeks later, after I was out in hospital, I remember sitting like I am sitting in front of you at my desk with a laptop here, with a supporting my side. So I had to have a certain type of chair that captured my, upper body and compacted it so I didn't have to put any muscle structure into trying to keep my weight up. But 10 minutes, that's all I had to speak. I was waiting for it to start. And 10 minutes at that initial period when they were asking me to talk about stuff, my heart rate was racing at 148.
Oh, wow.
It was screaming at me and I had to stay composed. I'd get through this. And the rest of the time, I just had to sit there. Once that finished, I was literally wiped out. But that gives you an idea of the sort of stuff that you're going through. But my focus is still about, I need to focus on this. And I was able to give my father a funeral. I never got to see him again. From the moment we went to hospital, it was all closed, zipped up. Probably one of the first people to do a Zoom-linked funeral, traditional funeral. But I spent the next year fighting and being positive and helping people be positive, coaching people through recovery and challenges. And I did that through people around the world reached out, from America to the Eastern Asia to Africa.
Mm.
I remember putting a video out in terms of a breathing technique that I'd learned, that I'd picked up. I called it the Kung Fu Panda. Why? Because I was going, well, Darth Vader meets the Kung Fu Panda, because I couldn't breathe through my nose because of this congestion and everything. So I learned to breathe through my mouth, in my belly, because that's where you had to get the oxygen in. And most of us men walk around with our chests up and our bellies sucked in, which doesn't help our lungs. So I did this kind of stuff. But what I'm trying to illustrate is I got through that. 2 years later, and there's lots that happened in between. 2 years later, after my mum had we'd recreated a home as a home. She was the heart of the home still. We went on a special pilgrimage to India. She really wanted to come. We did that. She came back really happy. Whole family went really at the peak of her feeling, at peace and joy.
Mm.
On the return leg, just before we were flying, we got a message that my mother-in-law was she was terminally ill for 4 years. So we knew she was going to go some stage, but that she's on her last leg. Can you get back in time? And we managed to get back in time and see her. I went into my normal operation mode. Let me look after everybody. I'll arrange the funeral for everybody. You guys carry on and do this. 2 days later, my mother, who was sitting at home in the normal way, her normal routine, had cooked, had just had some lunch. My daughter and I sitting at the dining room table, looking at the funeral invite for my mother-in-law. I'd arranged everything else. And this invite, we thought, well, maybe we can enhance this. So we're sitting there doing this. My mother walked out of the room from where she was sitting in the side room. 10 minutes later, my daughter said, has she come back in? And she went there and found her out cold. And I had spent 20 minutes trying to resuscitate her while the ambulance is on its way, the paramedics, knowing she'd gone, hearing the crack as you're trying to do CPR, not being able to say goodbye. So all these things happen. And the way that trauma hit me, I still was in, automatic mode of I know what I need to do now. And so that feeling, and at the same time, you are feeling this, but everybody else around you is feeling it. And my focus is, well, how are they coping? How can I keep a lid on this and support? So for the next 2 weeks, we did everything like we normally do. Family came around, friends came around. We had a really lovely ceremony for her. But the emptiness that you feel afterwards in a home that has had a heartbeat all your life, when it goes suddenly. Remember, I lost my father as well, who was part of my home, in different circumstances, different situations. And what I learned was, however resilient you think you are, however much you think you've handled trauma, you're only as strong and as resilient as your last worst experience. So why can I talk to people about trauma and help them through it? Why can I help navigate it myself? Because all the years I've been helping others, whether it's professionally trauma or life challenges, all of the things I was saying to them, I found myself telling myself that time will heal. Find time for you to express the feeling, let it out, even if you don't want to do it in front of everybody. Respect how other people in the home want to deal with this, which is they want to go silent. It's fine. Not healthy, but it's fine. And so, I put my whole life on hold. I still had to keep operating. So in the public arena, I had to perform. But what that did to me inside was the biggest challenge, I guess. 2 years down the road, she passed away in January 23, and we're now January 26.
Yeah.
So 2 years down the road, you can see that I'm able to talk about it freely. I've done a hell of a lot in the last year, but I gave myself a real pause for about a year where I was going, look, I need to be clear about everything, because you question everything. Life doesn't stop. It keeps giving you its other challenges. And people, where do you turn? And like I said, I've gone down that path of healing. I've gone down that path of keeping the wheels in motion, still keeping up with everything else I've talked about. The podcast you mentioned, Sanjiv Speaks, was supposed to be launched back in January 23 rather. My mother passed away, and I said, no, stopping. Because there's no point me talking about helping somebody if I'm not in the right space myself.
Yeah.
And everything I do, whether it's this or in the business world for corporates or leaders, I don't talk out of a textbook. Textbooks, sure, I read them, I studied them, I've done all of that, and I deliver them. However, being able to overlay that with real life experience and how the hell do you navigate when you've gone through this? And can you really relate to it? I guess that's one of the gifts, that these traumatic situations give you if you can get through it. So yeah, that trauma, am I still carrying a bit? I'm sure I am. You've seen it, experienced it. But that's reality. It's not a shame. It's like, okay, being tuned in, but then every day having the ability to, okay, right, focus, tune into where you are.
If this conversation resonated with you, consider following or subscribing to Mirror Talk on your favorite podcast platform. You can also support the show by sharing this episode with someone who might need it and by leaving a 5-star rating. It helps these conversations reach more people who could benefit from them.
Thank you so much for sharing your story in that vulnerable way. I really appreciate it. And you've given me a lot, to process also. I've learned a lot from your story. The act to keep on pushing on, act of leadership also, or your part. You were going through your own pains. Still you had to ensure that the family was doing well, was okay. You were, your father passed away, was still had to ensure that everyone is still okay and fine. And one thing else, one other thing I picked from your story was basically the way people grieve. Allow them to grieve the way they want to grieve. Allow them to process the way they want to process it. Like you said, some people might want to be in silence and just, process it in silence. It's not healthy, but just let them process it that way. It's okay. And that's what I learned also from you is basically, life will keep on, bringing different experiences, different challenges our way. And we just have to keep on, pushing through and becoming stronger from it. And that's why I'm inspired to even ask you this question. Like for listeners out there who have listened so far and they're asking themselves, like, am I actually resilient? I've listened to Sanjiv's story right now. And I can't compare myself. I can't compare my experience with that. So Sanjiv, when you hear the word resilience today, what emotion rises first in your body when you hear resilience?
Calm. Being able to navigate storms. And resilience is something that you develop. I say it's a conditioning, but it can also become complacent. It can, depending on how regular the storms come in your life or the scale of the storm. I don't dwell on I'm resilient. All I know is that if I want to navigate this life's journey, which is like an ocean journey, in my philosophy, life is like an ocean journey. You get calm waters, you get stormy waters. Expect them. Even if you've never had stormy waters in your life, expect they will happen at the last moment that you expect them to happen. But being able to be calm through highs as well as the lows, the difficult times, and have that balance of detachment, which is, you know what? It's not about giving up. It's about saying, I can only do what I can do. So you keep looking for ways and surrounding yourself with good sources of information, good people where you can help understand or reflect, but don't overdo it because there's too much noise out there. But resilience is really about creating balance in your own life for your benefit. Resilience isn't about anybody else. It's about you. And people start to own that. They go, okay, so how am I feeling? Touching base with yourself. So when you got resilience, okay, people might not even think about that word, but if they touch base with themselves, they're in a horrible place emotionally and mentally. So then what's going on? How are you managing your world? And having life hacks, having routine hacks to tune yourself back into living as opposed to being an automatic pilot, because we're conditioned in life to chase or be on this treadmill from the earliest years about education, job, career, university, whatever, earning money, getting a house, blah, 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 blah. Don't forget to live. And the resilience piece is when the tough times happen, having that pragmatic ability to stand back and go, okay, feel it, sure. Know it, understand it, but stand back. Now what? And that resilience for me is about the now what. It's happened. It's happening, but now what? And cutting out, knowing what noise to cut out, and then tuning in and making the best decision that you can based on that. Not being lazy, but taking it, but then go. And then if it doesn't work out, don't sit on it. You've made the best decision based on the information you had. You got new information, make a different decision. It's okay, course correct. So letting go, resilience. Tuning in, resilience. Scanning the horizon to see things coming, which makes you more resilient. So you avoid it rather than head towards. All of these are aspects of resilience for me.
Letting go, tuning in, detaching yourself from it, being calm, allowing yourself to feel it. It's all resilience. Would you say it's also like, saying to yourself, this too shall pass, this too shall pass?
Exactly. As I said to you, in life, like a journey, good times, bad times. What you can't control is how long it would take. But if you, like I said, in that difficult time, what else I telling you? it will go. This too shall
To
pass. It's a
go.
truth.
Yeah.
It's a universal truth. But if you know that, and for my benefit, I've helped people through, I've been through business challenges where things have gone crazy. But okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? Even if you can accept that, that's resilient. If you can own, because sometimes we're so fearful, we don't face it. So resilience is also about facing it, not hiding from it. Because when you face your fear, you can go, okay, rationalize this. You write it down. Okay, sure. Then what? And in philosophy times, you come with nothing, you go with nothing. You play your part. We different philosophies around why we're here, what we're here. But faith teaches us, gives us a strength. That you know what? You have a deck of cards you're dealt when you're born. You play those cards, but they unfold themselves at each stage of your life. You don't know what they are, but how you play them is important. You might not control what deck of cards you start off with, but at every turn, you have a choice and making a positive choice. And that's the thing, a positive choice, not a I can't do anything about it. Owning it. Every situation, whether it's a tough situation or not, it's a choice. You have that choice or that choice. It's understanding, find the choices. There might be two terrible choices, but one's better than the other. And the way our human minds work is the moment we go, that's better than that one. Good. Their focus comes on, that's better. Let's go with that way. It's not Disney, right? It's not everything's rosy, but that's life. It's okay. Enjoy it with all the spectrums. You can enjoy the rain. You can enjoy the storms, because without that contrast, you can't enjoy the sunshine.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true, yes. I just remember right now, people say a lot that life is not a bed of roses. Roses have thorns too. So if you expect it to be a bed of roses, it's good. It will hurt you in some ways.
Yeah. So for your younger audience, when we're talking about this, there's people from the age of 18 or so who listen to your podcast. And I wanted to share something, if I may, about resilience and how to deal with trauma in the context of my younger ages. So I came from a migrant family, hardworking, had to start from scratch, keep out of trouble, don't complain about anything. And the only way to get ahead in life is to get a great education, great qualifications, get a great degree, get a great job. That was my dad's conditioning for me. Now, I didn't know any better. I was a respectful son. So I ended up studying something I hated. I was never the person that asked for help. I was always the one that people turned to for help. I don't know if people can relate to that. We have people like that around us in our circles, right? Something happens, you go to that person. And there's some people who are very comfortable constantly going, yeah, I need help, which is nothing wrong with that either. But I'm always been that person. Yeah, sure. But there becomes an expectation of that, an expectation of always being the one that everybody goes, yeah, he's going to be fine. He's this, he's that. There's a narrative, right? But it becomes a pressure. And especially if there isn't readily available help, you kind of just suck it up and you do it. And I be honest with you, having a brother who's so smart, he's going to go to medical school in Oxford and Southampton and do this great stuff, who had a photographic memory, where I'm struggling to do my exams and study for these cram stuff in at this certain age in life, because I had no connection. I ended up studying a degree that I hated. Great institute. There's no thinking about why am I doing this? I did a chemistry and management degree back in the day at King's College. Each year I'd, study things because I have to cram it and memorize it. But did I have a connection with it? No. So I was kind of getting by just enough to get through to the next year, which is not a good thing to do. Advice to people, young people, if you find yourself studying something you do not connect with, life is not a race. It's better to go course correct. Think about it again. What should I be doing? Tune into yourself and your skills and your passions. Look at the outside world and find something that way. Don't have to be orthodox. I encourage people, because I do executive coaching and leadership and career coaching too. And this is such powerful insights to go, it's not a race. If you realize partway down that journey, this is wrong for you, don't suffer and dig a hole. Exit early and reevaluate, whatever that means. So I ended up at the end of this degree, being the person that everybody expected to get everything fine, hunky-dory right, coming out with a terrible degree, which I talk about in my TED Talk. And I shared that because, you know what? I felt a failure. I couldn't face anybody. I couldn't share with anybody and celebrate like people do. Look, I've got this degree, because it was such a bad degree, poor level. It wasn't even a passport into the working world. And I'm thinking, do I let this define me? And that was a real point of reflection. I was at a low ebb thinking, what happens to my future? Because in that mindset, in that paradigm that I was in, my future's gone. I'm a failure and I don't know what the heck I'm going to do with my future. But thankfully, that reset process, and I talk about that in my 3 R's, a reflection and a reset comes first. Reflection, reframe, reset. In other words, okay, what happened? How did I get here? And be objective. Like I said, the power of being objective, being an observer of yourself is a great skill that I help people through. When you can do that, you can say, yeah, this is what you should have done better or what you could have done differently. These are the dynamics involved without being emotional about it and letting your ego play. So if you take your ego out, you sit there and go, yep. Okay, what do I do from here? I have an opportunity. I got myself a graduate role somehow, fortunate opportunity. And I decided from there, I will be the best version of just me every day. I'm starting on an even playing field with everybody else. And that allowed me to succeed because I wasn't playing anybody else's game. Although at the time, in a way I was, because I had that job because it was a reputable job, a bank manager.
Oh, nice.
Even that I realized wasn't for me, but that's a different story. My point is I've built whatever I've built from being a failure. And so for young people who don't know where they're going, find good people around you that can be honest and give you good advice. For those who are already down this path and it's not working, reevaluate. It's never too late to reevaluate. I don't care if you're 18 or if you're 68. It's all right. Any stage of your life, you can reevaluate and course correct. Just because you're on this course and, society makes you feel that you don't have a choice. It might feel you've got no choice, but if you can accept what's the worst that's going to happen or create space for yourself to do something differently, you may have to make sacrifices. It's okay. Own it. So yeah, that's how I would say to younger people listening to this, perhaps this will resonate with them more.
Yes, totally. Yeah. I love the three R's that you shared right now, flex, frame, and then reset, which is very important. When you were sharing your story about, studying what you studied because of your parents, I could relate to that totally because, I'm from an African home, very traditional African home. And it's kind of similar in that kind of regards to, my parents, I was lucky to have friends that, supported me to do what I wanted to do. But I know a lot of times it's given like a guideline. You either become a doctor or you become an engineer or you become a lawyer or nothing else, basically. So
Exactly.
But,
Exactly.
Yeah. So
But
one question. It wasn't exactly. It was not like that. One question that was coming up for me was like, if I were to choose a different path apart from becoming an engineer that I am today, and I had to face my parents with that, that challenge of not doing what they wanted me to do or being in that framework that they had, how will I be able to do that to break free to be what I truly want to be?
That's a really great question with probably a lot of layers of answers. But what I would say is that the basis of your thinking and the decision, you have to be thorough about it. It can't just be an impulse. And just as if one day you become a parent, put yourself in that shoe. You can't, it's difficult when you're young to understand what it would be like. But you're talking about guiding somebody with your heart. The parent's motivation is always right. And I say this to a lot of people. They might not execute it the best way that you want them to, but their heart's in the right place. So then, okay, think about how they think. Are they a logic person? Then guess what? Stack up as much information, research, justification of why this might not be right. Present it to talk to them in their language. Don't be, you got to understand this, you don't get me. That's not going to wash, right? So if your parents go, yeah, your security, you understand, you want my security. But security, if you can't do well in a career, is useless to anybody because you don't get security. And why am I struggling? Because of this? But there's these other options. And I had a similar conversation, to be fair, with my dad, which is, oh yeah, you can't be an accountant. You can't go into finance. Nobody makes it who's Indian in the finance industry. I said, but why? But that was his paradigm. So I had to kind of rationalize it and relate to it with him, and I guess proved it. You got to be able to back yourself and then go. You can't just decide to do something different and then not give the whole full commitment. I think in anything you pursue, you can. If you're passionate about it and you're deep enough about it and you're committed, you can make something happen, make it work. Whatever the challenges along the way, it doesn't mean it's easy. But when it doesn't feel like work and you're passionate and committed, it becomes easier to perform better. Yeah? So speaking to your parents, speak with them with respect. Speak to them in their language. Understand what kind of challenges or thinking they have, and then go damn well do some research. And when you talk to them with insight. Get people who they trust as well. Sell it to them as well, right? So you might have an uncle, an aunt, a friend, a blah, blah. Go for it because it's your life, right? But if you want to, it's always constructive. I'm a big believer in stakeholder management, engagement. So a lot of the stuff I get involved in is complex and lots of different interests, but finding the path through that fits for everybody, it's a way you do it, right? It's the approach you have and quite often the language you choose to use.
Yeah. Because I think at the end of the day, they love us so much and they're just trying to protect us, protect our future. And we have to convince them that we know what we want for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, but you start with, I know you're saying this because you love me. I know you're saying this because you want to protect me. And you validate that subconsciously. They're going, okay, they're agreeing with me. Fantastic. Build some bridges. That's the starting point of the conversation. Acknowledge why they're doing it. Don't criticize them for taking you down the path, because that's not a good way to build a bridge.
And I've learned a lot from you, but there's something I definitely want to ask you, and that's about your leadership skills and how you lead and show up as a leader today, at home and also at your place of work. Like, after going through everything that you've gone through and, your healing journey that you're on right now also, how has all of that experience that life has brought your path changed the way that you show up as a leader, the way you are a leader? How grief and your healing journey has modified or changed the way you show up as a leader?
Okay. I think for me, part of being who I am and part of learning and growing is having tuned into humility, making sure my ego is not playing. So challenges, whether in business or in life, help you get a level of pulling your ego down, which is, you know what? You don't always have all the answers. You know what? There is no absolute ABC formula that leads to success. Be honest. But then that journey of trusting, finding people you trust and surrounding yourself with those people. I don't mean yes people. I don't mean people who disagree with everything you say. I mean people who are there, because that's what I try and do. I try and show up for people as a safe space. So if I'm advising an industry leader, or if I'm advising somebody on a personal level, I'm the same person. I show up as me, as a safe space with my motivation to serve. And a leader, I talk about servant leadership and the HEALS model. You mentioned it earlier. My paradigm for leadership is very much has been conditioned, I guess, grown into a model that I can describe, which is what attributes does a leader have that I think I would like to imbibe? H for that HEALS model is for humility. And then understanding there's a whole bunch of layers of how, you ask somebody, have you got an ego? Most people say no. Okay, but I explore that in terms of their interactions with people, how they operate, how they make decisions. So humility. And you can't be a leader without understanding people and understanding you don't have all the answers. So put your ego on one side. You can't do anything by yourself in life if you want to scale it. Then there's emotional intelligence and empathy. I've learned, to become more tuned into people, not less. Tragedy and trauma can make you less tuned into people. I think you've got a choice. And my choice is to be more tuned into people. So you can sense something before it's even said. You can read a room. You can understand and sense check something about the way somebody says something or doesn't say something, and understanding the dynamics between people and accepting that people can be different, extremely different in their communication behavior, but still have value. I've learned not to go, okay, detach. Okay, see it for what it is, and let's see how we build this. Awareness. I talk a lot about this. Self-awareness is where it starts. As a leader, you think, okay, awareness of my business and the organization. No, awareness of yourself. As a leader, you have to be, humility lets you do that. They go, okay, I have a practice every day, in the morning, quiet, pray. I am only a vehicle for doing good in the world or doing good where I can. I can't guarantee the outcome, but I want to be the best channel for that to help make a difference. And where I can't, be humble enough to look for help. It's taught me that as well, because I never used to ask for help because ego, right? You might not think it's playing, but it's playing. So self-awareness, awareness of yourself, your people around you, whether it's your family, your organization, your team, the world. External awareness. That's HEA. Well, somebody who listens. I've talked a lot because it's a podcast and you want to hear from me.
Yes.
But the first thing a leader should do is listen. And listen doesn't just mean listening like this. It means go and find out. Get out of your office and go and be around people in your organization. Not where you're line managing them, just listening, understanding people. When you understand people, you hear things that are really useful. Not just to make them feel good, but really useful and powerful. I'll give you a great example of that in a minute. So HEALS, L, that's listening. And the last thing is serve. The purpose of a leader is to serve. If you think it's a crown and it's a place for you to earn ego, pride, status, money, not my kind of leader. That is a byproduct of being a great leader. So what's your purpose? Why are you doing this? So if a leader can understand why they're doing this or why this organization, what's the purpose of this organization, your reason why, things join up. Without lots of technical stuff, people resonate with a reason why, a purpose. So the listening bit is a little anecdote. It's a fun one, but I'll share it with you.
Yes, please.
So one of the businesses I was involved in, and I got asked to be part of a startup. Well, it was a management buyout that turned into a startup or a telco. And parts of the world still have this opportunity where there's a traditional carrier, one dominant monopoly for the country that does all the telephone supplies, and they have the power of the pricing and the network. So everything is, consumer doesn't benefit. There came a deregulation phase in the UK where I was asked to be part of this. This opportunity came my way. And during that opportunity, we faced some really big highs and big lows. And it's kind of one of those experiences that, okay, we've sorted this. Fantastic. Then suddenly something else goes wrong. And then fantastic. And then something else happens. I remember walking out of the office on a Friday afternoon, and we had a call center, customer service center for this telecoms company that we'd set up. And on the way out, I was planning to have an early afternoon, by the way, because everything was nice and calm for that period. And then I overheard a conversation, and I thought, hang on, what's going on here? I overheard a conversation where something had gone wrong. So a customer had rung in saying, we can't make any calls. And if you're a telephone company and the customer can't make calls, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
So, right? So I'm going,
Yeah.
okay. So then I hung around and I heard other people having similar conversations. So I realized this wasn't a one-off problem. There's something else going on. So I stood back and I went, damn. So I then had to go back into my office and trying to make calls to all the key partners that we have, the suppliers, the carriers, blah, blah. And I realized somebody had made a mistake on our account, which meant that somebody had canceled all of our traffic at the main switch. Through no fault of our own, by the way. Somebody had just done something. Late on a Friday afternoon, we have business customers who can't make calls. And I said to my staff, had a briefing, team meeting, little white lie. I like to think I'm honest, but sometimes little white lies work. That the team, I said, look, I know we're going to fix this in my head. I know how to fix this because we haven't done anything wrong, but it will take a little bit of time. How long that would take, I don't know. So I said to the team, listen, there's something going on with the switches. I'm dealing with the carrier. You ring now, instead of waiting for calls, you ring customers. You ring them and saying, look, there's been a problem with one of our switches. And whilst we get that fixed, there was some construction work or whatever there's going on. People understand that kind of simple logic. Okay, so somebody's done some construction, some cables cut, but you're going to fix it. All customers want to know you're going to fix it and that you're proactively doing it. So I got them to do that. I got them to call people out, and people were really thankful because we gave them a solution, a temporary fix in that period. And look, as it would have it, within an hour and a half or two, everything was back online. But so listening, I wouldn't have picked that up. I would have left without, if I wasn't listening, and left home, and this customers would have been without this service for the whole weekend, and Monday morning would have been even more of a disaster. And the motivation of the staff, the morale for the staff would be, they're getting complaints. Why are we doing this? Why are we working with this company? So lots of implications, but that's how I handled it. And it worked. So we had even more loyal customers because of our proactive approach to problem fixing.
That's awesome. A mindful leader, a great leader is someone who listens and who serves and seeks for solution. Yeah. Wow. So, I've asked you a lot of questions. I've learned from you a lot in this conversation. But I know there's still a listener out there, someone who is watching or just listening, who is still inside their grief or trauma right now. And that person is, feeling that pressure to go back to work, to move on, to stay functional, to suppress. I just want to know from your experience and from from a wealth of knowledge, like, what would you wish that person right now? What would you wish someone had even told you when you were in that situation too?
So I want them to know that it's okay to feel the pain. I want them to know it's not a weakness, it's being human. I want them to know that it's okay to ask for help and then reach out for that. Time will heal, but knowing that somebody understands is powerful. I remember when I was going through this, people don't know how to respond, right? You suffer loss, people message you, share their condolences. But when you're suffering that level of trauma, you don't even want to talk about it. So it's okay. But be kind to yourself. Tune into yourself. If it means stepping back from certain things, it's okay. But reach out, ask for help. There is plenty of help out there for trauma victims. And by all means, if anybody wants to message and call after this podcast goes out, find me on my website, drop me a message on the chat here. I'll try and interact with them and guide them in the right direction. But trauma is real. But time, if you keep dealing with it like you would for another illness. So if you hurt yourself, you broke your leg, something tragic happens, what do? You seek medical help, right?
Yeah.
So think of trauma as you have an injury. It's an emotional, mental injury. It's fine. Is it random? No, people have this. This is normal humans, right? But society quite often says, if it's a mental health issue, it's an emotional issue, you can't talk about it. You're weak. Culturally, sometimes from our cultures, it's very much that way. The man is the person that, no, we can't. We are strong.
Yeah.
People commit suicide. More men commit suicide than women. Why? Because they bottle it up. They think they have to put a front up. They think they have to provide. It's okay. You're human like everybody else is human. So reaching out for help. There are lots of, on the internet, there's some lovely groups out there, social groups, even in your WhatsApp groups, within the Facebook environment, within the Instagram environment. But if you look out, there are groups of people who've been through the shared experience. And then finding yourself interacting with them is free, right?
Yeah.
Being in a space where people understand that they can relate to what you've been going through gives you kind of a bit of strength, gives you comfort, a safe space. But certainly don't be scared to ask for help. Find the help. It doesn't always, if it doesn't come from the medical health service that you have around you, there are lots, like I said, social environments, groups out there who are support groups. And I think be brave enough and confident enough to accept that you're not well. And then take the next step, just like you would if you got hit by a car and you've broken your leg. Would you ask for help? Yeah.
Yes.
You won't sit there, go home and say, it's okay, the pain will go away. No, you need to have it investigated and follow through whatever treatment there is.
Yeah.
Is it going to happen overnight? No, it's not. But accept it. But it will happen.
It will.
It will happen.
It's very true. Admit that you need the help and ask for the help. You're not alone in your journey. Wow. For people out there who still have more questions to ask you, who want to, work with you, connect with you in one way or the other, what's the best way to do this? What's the best way to reach out to you?
So I have a website, sanjivspeaks.com. So ping me on the contact me, and there's my Calendly's on there. Following this podcast, if you're on your channel, there's questions. I'm happy to try and answer to a level that's general, so everybody can learn from it. And I have an Instagram page as well, Sanjiv Speaks.
Nice.
Follow and interact with that. And hopefully we've shared something today that will help at least one person out there. And if it does, we've done a great job. Made a difference.
That's very true. I'm going to place a link to your website in the show notes of this episode. I encourage everyone out there to click on the link, copy the link. They'll find all the information they need to reach out to you, to listen to your podcast. Also, Just Another Lens, which is a very wonderful podcast to learn from, and also just to, engage with your other content that you put out there, from Sanjiv Speaks to, to even also watch your TEDx, speeches also. That'll be awesome. Thank you so much, Sanjiv. It's been a great blessing speaking with you.
One last thing. I'd love to hear what people would want to hear about me. In other words, if there's something that they'd like me to share on my social media, tell me. I'm more than happy to talk about or share insights into anything. So I'm very much about, what do you want? What more can I talk about? Where can I help? And I'll try and serve them in that way as well.
Yeah. And that's a great quality of a leader, right? Asking for feedback. Let me know how I can serve you better. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sanjiv. I appreciate this.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. Take care. Stay blessed.
Stay blessed.
If this conversation resonated with you, consider following or subscribing to Mirror Talk on your favorite podcast platform. You can also support the show by sharing this episode with someone who might need it, and by leaving a 5-star rating. It helps these conversations reach more people who could benefit from them.
Thank you very much.